Shri Karan Khan, Chairman of the Delhi Bhartia Vidya Bhawan, distinguished panelists, हमारे बुजुर्ग, मौलाना साहब, and representatives from various religions. Let me say at the outset that I would like to congratulate the Bhartia Vidya Bhavan and Dr. Agarwal for having chosen to begin with a very interesting debate regarding health, and for trying to show, I think, ultimately that every religion believes in a healthy body. Shri Karan Khan has raised a very deep philosophical problem which I do not intend to address, because that would require a separate symposium. When you have your next symposium on reincarnation, if you call me, I'll give you my views on what I think of the whole theory of reincarnation. Put it very simply, I think it is the only working hypothesis that makes any sense in the world in which we live. Whether it is true or not, we do not know. We'll only know after we die. But the fact that theoretically no other structure gives any kind of justification for the iniquities, for the cruelties, for the disasters that are befalling the earth. And therefore, perhaps one can use the reincarnation paradigm, as it were, as a sort of a paradigm to try and explain some of the strange things that are happening on earth. However, I will not go into that. As I said, Ashok Pradhan started off by quoting the famous words, Sharira Madhyam Khalu Dharma Sadhanam, that the body is the basis of all dharma. A healthy body does not guarantee happiness, but an unhealthy body guarantees that we will not be happy. This symposium is health and happiness, remember, not only health. Because if you are unwell, then you are unlikely to be happy. There are some people I know who can overcome physical problems, but generally speaking, a certain basic threshold of good health is required for any type of enjoyment or happiness. Now, every religion in the world speaks of the importance of health, and that is why we have so many systems of medicine. We have Ayurveda, we have Unani, we have Siddha, we have the Tibetan system of medicine, we have homeopathy, we have allopathy, the modern medicine, and so on. And therefore every civilization has produced its own system of medicine. And perhaps India is the only country in the world where all these systems flourish. I don't think you will find any country. I remember as health minister, we set up national institutes for each one of these systems. The National Institute of Siddha in Chennai, of homeopathy in Calcutta, of Ayurveda I think in Jaipur, and of Siddha, the Tibetan medicine and so on. So we have accepted as part of our pluralistic culture the importance of many religions, the importance of many languages, and the importance of many systems of health. I think that's an important point to remember, because that represents the extraordinary diversity that India has, and the fact that it has relished that diversity, it has honored that diversity. The diversity is not something that we lament, it is something that we embrace. Now, when we talk of health and happiness, I'd like to just point out that the human being is a multidimensional entity. It has many dimensions. And I think health also has to be looked upon in many dimensions. So what I'm going to do this morning, this afternoon briefly, is not so much to talk upon, we can talk upon Hinduism, there are others who are talking. Every one of our texts starts with a prayer. And that prayer is usually for strong. Bhadram karnebhish krinuyama deva bhadram pashyemakshabhiryajatra sthirairangai sushtuvagushastanu virvyashema devahitam yadayu. May we see auspicious sight, that means may our sight be clear. May we hear auspicious sounds, May our bodies and limbs be strong. The Vedas are full of prayers for strong bodies. And that is why there is that extraordinary prayer in the Vedas, Jivem Sharada Shatam Shanuyam Sharadasram. May we live for 100 years, but not only live, may we hear for 100 years, may we speak for 100 years, may we act for 100 years, may we rise for 100 years. In other words, 100 years was supposed to be, I suppose, the ideal lifespan at that time, and it was regarded that we must be healthy at 100. Not just exist till 100, but to be healthy at 100. But let me come to these 4 dimensions of health that I would like to mention. The first and the most obvious one is physical health. And that is something I feel that we generally neglect in this country. I used to say we need a national fitness campaign, because we used to have the akhadas and various things, they've all disappeared. If you go to China and you get up in the morning in Beijing, there are lakhs of people doing what is known as Tai Chi, which is a sort of a slow motion yoga, Chinese yoga. And they are all doing it outside their houses, whether they're young or old. But we have given up our regular routine exercises. Neither do we walk regularly, nor do we do any particular exercises in our own home. For yoga, you don't need expensive gyms. Nowadays, the fashion is that youngsters have got to pay a lakh of rupees a month to become a member of a gym. I don't understand what you can do at a gym that you can't do at home. You can do all the exercises at home. For yoga, you don't need a gym, you don't even need your clothes. You can just do it within your room. So the idea, the culture of physical fitness is something we've got to re-establish, recreate, rediscover. And we also, what I always speak to young people, don't poison your body. If they poison their bodies with alcohol, or with drugs, or with tobacco, or with unsafe sex, they're poisoning their own bodies. They're not doing anybody else a favor by giving these up, they're doing themselves a favor. And I always tell them that what you do now when you're young will determine what you are like when you are my age. And I'm over 80, by the way. So, because it depends on how you spend your youth. You mustn't, there's some young people in the audience, I want to address them. Bernard Shaw said a marvelous thing. He said, youth is a wonderful thing, what a pity it is wasted on the young. Meaning thereby that young people don't always appreciate that every day of their lives is an opportunity to improve their health, to improve their bodies, to improve their physical fitness. And therefore, it's very important. I'm very glad that smoking, there's an anti-smoking campaign now. Smoking is an anti-social act. It's not only bad for the person who smokes, it's also bad for the people around them who will be quite innocent, the so-called passive smokers. वो बदोबदी उनको सांस लेना पड़ता है तंबाकू, which is not fair. We should have cubicles, I think. Anybody who wants to kill themselves can go and lock themselves in and smoke themselves to death. But why should we inhale the smoke of people who want to do that? Similarly, alcoholism. All these Amir Khan programs that are coming on, they're very pertinent, because alcoholism has become a major menace today. And again, alcoholism doesn't only affect the alcoholic, but affects everybody around him or her. It affects the family, particularly the children, the neighbors. It's a menace. And therefore, we've got to run a proper campaign. I'm not being particularly sort of, difficult or puritanical. I'm simply saying that we should not indulge in activities that are anti-social. If you want to have a drink or so in the evening, it doesn't do very much harm. But if you're an alcoholic, which means that you depend upon your alcohol almost throughout the day, then that becomes a real menace. So I would say regular exercise, proper diet. In Delhi, everybody tends to overeat, I find. The Punjabis खास तौर पे खूब राजी की रोटी खाते होंगे, which is good, of course. खानी भी चाहिए थी, रब ने दी हुई है, लेकिन ज़्यादा नहीं खानी चाहिए. I think one should be very careful because obesity, Dr. Saab, I think you will agree, is one of the major causes of illness. And you go around seeing very, very fat people, very fat children. I always get very upset when I see a fat child, not a baby, I mean a child who's 8 or 10 or 11. I was just up in Kashmir and went to one of the new hotels, and suddenly a group of rotund people came in, the father, the mother, the children, they were all गोल मोल थे सारे. उनके ये पता नहीं क्या बात है, कोई genetic configuration है, ये रोटी ज़्यादा खाते हैं, क्या करते हैं. Whatever it is, regulated diet, regulated alcohol, no smoking whatsoever, regulated exercise, proper posture. Do we teach our children how to sit? We don't. How to breathe? Breathing is the most simple and most elementary of all activities. Do we teach people how to breathe? Breathing itself can bring about a great deal of health. Your lungs expand, your mind clarifies if you are taught how to breathe properly. So these very fundamental and simple things we neglect. We have super specialities. I was also health minister. We have cardiac surgery, and we have neurosurgery, and we have all sorts of marvelous machines. Fair enough, they're welcome. But if we are able to introduce some of these simple points into the daily lives of people, then perhaps our general health standards would improve. And it is a disgrace in this country that crores and crores of children are undernourished, malnourished. Can you imagine the deprivation that we impose upon our children if they do not get necessary nutritional inputs during the pregnancy or their in childhood? They grow up with stunted bodies and stunted minds. They can never become full and active and cheerful citizens of this country. I think it's a disgrace. I think we've got to restructure our organizations. We've got to restructure. We have lots of grain, but for some inexplicable reason we are not able to get it to the people who need it. चूहे खाते हैं. मैंने एक पतला चूहा नहीं देखा कभी हिंदुस्तान में. चूहे सारे मोटे गोल मोल हैं क्योंकि they eat the अनाज which should go to those children in the rural areas who are undernourished and malnourished. I don't want to get into there's a big discussion on that, who's to blame and what is to be done and all. I'm just making the point that when you talk of health, these fundamental basic matters have to be looked into. Apart, of course, from the importance of regular medical checkups. Dr. Agarwal will tell you about that. And also, if I may say so, Dr. Saab, also high ethical standards on behalf of the doctors. Everybody is very upset with Amir Khan's program, but it is true that there are some doctors who do misuse their position. Don't you remember some years ago, there was that horrible story of how doctors used to bind the legs of these people so that they developed gangrene, cut their legs off so that they could go begging. I want to know what happened to those doctors. Were they blacklisted? Were they sent to jail? What happened to them? They just disappear. It hits the headlines for a couple of days and then nobody bothers about it. So the doctors, the Medical Council of India, they have got to maintain high professional standards. No unnecessary surgery. America, one of the banes of America is unnecessary surgery. You go to a surgeon and before you know what's happening, you're on the table with sodium pentothal and you're getting operated. Surgery is necessary when necessary, but not unnecessary. So these are related things, health services and so on. So the first thing I'm talking about is physical health. And a lot has to be done to ensure physical health. A great deal. Our hospitals most of them are substandard. Our primary health centers, which was supposed to be the core around which our health policy developed, are not always well equipped. The outreaches, the dispensaries are very often devoid of medicines. And this corruption which eats into our society, our polity, our whole life like an acid. Medicines are sold in the black market and people sometimes get wrong medicines and so on. So a lot is wrong with our health system. We've got to set it right. Second element, I think, of health is emotional health. Don't forget, our emotions are as important as any other aspect in our lives. Anger, fear, revenge are every bit as lethal as tuberculosis, cancer or AIDS, because they eat you in from within. And it has now been proved that there is a direct relationship between the emotional state and the physical state. The mind-body relationship is now being clearly understood. So emotional stability has to be there. There are hardly any psychiatric facilities in our country. Of course, the gurus in our country do fulfill that task. The much maligned gurus, though they do fulfill an important task. Because in America, you go to your shrink, as they call him, in a very derogatory manner. A shrink being a psychologist. But in India, we go to the guru. I'm coming to that element. But whatever we do, our emotional stability must be there. We must learn that life is not always smooth. There are ups and downs. Dukh sukhe samay kritva labha labhav jaya jayo. Gita teaches us, in victory or in defeat, in joy or in sorrow, in heat or in cold, we must maintain our equanimity. Tasya pragya pratishtita. He who does that, his consciousness is stable. Yogash chitta vritti nirodha, the controlling of the modifications of the mind is yoga. Therefore, the emotions and the mind are very closely linked. They have to be looked into. If you want a really healthy person, you've got to have somebody who is not only physically fit, but who is emotionally stable and who is intellectually alert. Because then only can you fulfill the immense possibilities of human birth. Now we are living now in an age in which everything is collapsing, the old is disappearing, the new is struggling to be born, and we find ourselves precariously poised between a disappearing past and an indeterminate future. There's a growth of consumerism, of consumerism, of hyper promiscuity in television. We are bombarded all the time by these negative images. If you look at any film today, particularly American films, there's nothing but death and destruction. Whether it is from outer space, whether it is from weird creatures coming out from the depths of the unconscious. I don't know how they produce those monsters that come and devour us, or their guns being shot. Where is the reverence for life? We talk of the reverence for life. Life is something sacred. Where is the sacred? When you can just shoot people down, when you can bomb people into non-existence. So we are living in a very difficult time. Difficult in the sense that we are living at a time where there's a lot of positivity with science and technology, and young people are full of idealism, but there's a lot of negativity also. A lot of negative forces are emerging. And in order to really have health and happiness, we've got to take cognizance of those. I've never been able to understand why these horror films are made. Why should you be frightened out of your wits? What is the point of making a horror film? वो भूत प्रेत निकल रहे हैं और वो कर रहे हैं, उधर से आ रहे, मतलब क्या उसका? बड़ा चंगा बच्चे के दिमाग के ऊपर क्या असर पड़ेगा? सारी उम्र भयभीत रहेंगे. I saw an advertisement. Now you can see your nightmares with your eyes open. ये अच्छी civilization है हमारी. All we've achieved is to see our nightmares with our eyes open. These wretched horror films, I'm not so much worried about even the sex, but the horror films, I think, should be banned. What is it? You're poisoning the springs of the minds of the children. If where your grandchildren study, you found that the drinking water is poisoned, क्या करेंगे आप? भागेंगे, दौड़ेंगे, शीला जी को घेरेंगे, देखिए हमारे स्कूल में पानी पीने को नहीं है. लेकिन जब आपके बच्चों के दिमाग पोल्यूट हो रहे हैं तो आपको किसी को चिंता नहीं है. आप मजे से मस्त बैठे। याद रखिए, दिमागी पोल्यूशन जो है वो जिस्मानी पोल्यूशन से ज्यादा खतरनाक होता है। एंड आई थिंक देयरफॉर एनलाइटेंड एंड एजुकेटेड पीपल शुड रियलाइज the importance of physical health, the importance of emotional health, the importance of intellectual and mental health, and then of course the importance of spiritual health. I remember that at one time I can't know whether I have the quotation or not, the World Health Organization described healthy as somebody who was socially integrated, mentally alert and physically fit. So I said to the Director General, that applies to a pack of wolves. The wolves are very fit, they are very alert, there is a lot of teamwork, but unless you add the spiritual dimension, you do not get the human being. And therefore the spiritual dimension, we are all here in an interfaith gathering. Ekam sat vipraha bahuda vadanti. The truth is one, the wise call it by many names. Unless we follow some path, I think, I know there are some people who may not need a path. They look upon it as an unnecessary crutch. Well, fair enough, if they are strong enough to deal with everything without following any spiritual path, I respect them for that. But I would say that the large majority of people in our country at least are following one or other of the spiritual paths. And all the religions flourish in India. The four Indic religions, Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism and Sikhism. The four Semitic religions that came from the West, Zarathustrianism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and now the Baha'i faith, they all flourish in India. So whether you follow meditation or Zen or yoga or prayer or whatever, I feel that in order to fulfill our potentialities, we should also develop a spiritual dimension. And it is only if the physical, the emotional, the mental and the spiritual dimensions are developed that we will move towards health and happiness. Thank you.
May I invite Dr. K.K. Agarwal to please take on the discussions from here onwards. Dr. K.K. Agarwal.
Hello. Thank you.
No, sir, मैं आगे लूँगा आपसे. I'm sorry. निकलना पड़ेगा.
Memento.
Memento. हाँ, memento दे दीजिए.
I'll request the chairman, Bhartia Vidya Bhawan, Shri C.R. Ghare Khan ji, to present a memento to our chief guest, Dr. Karan Singh ji. And I also request all of us to have we can stand and have a group photograph with him so that the same can be a remembrance. So some